Okay, you want to try to listen to this?
Yeah, sure. What are we going to listen to?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the album that was just released, I Carry Your Heart. So, everybody, pull up this title track. You can search for it on YouTube. I Carry Your Heart by Taylor Scott Davis. This piece is a combination of a small vocal ensemble. It looks like when I was looking at it, 12 men, 12 women, three violins, is that two cellos?
It's two violins, a viola, which just looks like uh, a violin with a little holiday weight on it, and then cello and double bass.
Double bass. That's
Yeah.
what that thing is called. Yeah, that's cool. And the harp. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Um, so, as a sound tech, what I was thinking is you've got something to occupy the lower range frequencies that have like the longer, more sustained notes. And then you've got the mid range and the high with the violins, and then the harp is like sitting on top, plucking through the arpeggios and the chord progressions. Is that the way that you look at song construction? Like, did you do that purposefully?
Um, I chose a string quintet because I liked the intimacy of sound. One in basically what I'm saying is one instrument, as opposed to a section, um, is being represented from the strings. So it would be like if we took one soprano, one alto, one tenor, one bass. That's essentially what a string quartet is: one soprano, one alto, one tenor, one bass. Um, a string quintet adds a double bass, which gives you an extra layer down, an extra octave down from the cello, and the it creates this sense of warmth, um, with just one player on each part, as opposed to a section. And it's not that one is better than the other, but it creates a sense of warmth and a sense of intimacy. It's almost like these people have shown up just to play for you, as opposed to a full section, which could potentially be like 30 plus people if we were to do a full section of violins, a full section of violas, cellos, and basses. Then the harp is, that an easy substitute for the harp would be a piano, or like if a guitarist had a classical, like a nylon string guitar, just kind of churning these rhythms out, so it allows the voices and the strings to just sort of create these long held phrases, and those notes on their own would feel really elongated and like they were free of time and beats, if it weren't for the fact that the harp is underneath saying, nope, we're staying at this tempo, and we're sort of like just churning through each measure. So everybody does play their own part, for sure.
Which instrument did you start with when you were writing this, or how did it come to you? Do the longer droning notes come to you as more like a chord progression, or how do you even begin thinking about this?
I started with harp and voice. And so the opening tenor line, although with Voces 8 and the Voces 8 Foundation choir, the all the tenors and basses are singing. So it's both sections as opposed to just the tenors. And what happens then is the basses, because they're singing at the very, very top end of what's possible, they add this color, this texture to the sound that the tenors are, otherwise that's like their home field advantage up there. So it creates this very buttery, velvety sound. So I started with the tenor line, that opening vocal line, and harp, and then after I got the choir parts done, I went back and added the string parts.
So you purposefully had the bass singers, the men, sing in a higher register up almost where the tenors would be in order to create the sound of that, because it wouldn't be as natural for them, but they sort of have like bigger like resonance to that. That's
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
That's a great way to think about it. So the tenors up there can, because that's just home base, that can sound a little bit edgier. They can really cut through sound up there. And as the basses rise up and join the tenors, it sort of rounds out the sound a little bit. So it's nothing that the tenors could do authentically on their own. They really need the help of the basses to do that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm going to look at my notes about the song because there were certain parts that I wanted to highlight. The harp sort of comes in beautifully solo, introducing us to what the piece is going to be, and then the cello comes in and brings in that melody, and the men come in vocally to reinforce it, and the cello and the violins come back in together, and then they pretty much, yes, this is the part, they pretty much play the same line for a minute, and then right there at about 134 or 135, the violin line deviates from the cello and plays a similar line at an interval above it in higher notes. And I'm telling you, that is when I'm like, I'm trying not to.
That's the
That
good
is
stuff.
when I start to tear up. And every time I can't even listen to it right now because every time I listen to it, it's like it pulls at your heartstrings. Like, did you do that on purpose? That's my question.
Well, I wasn't gunning for your heartstrings personally, but there is, I think part of what you're experiencing right there is, for that first minute, the cello and the singers and the harp are making sound. Obviously, in watching the video, you can see the other players. You know they're going to come in at some point, but what's it going to be like when the viola comes in and they start to have this little duet almost, where it's like they're moving together. Moving from one voice to two is quite impactful. And if I had just started with two voices, I don't think you would have felt that same way. It's like it's unfurling in front of you in a way that feels emotional. And if you start there, how do you get bigger? So one of the keys was starting small and giving the singers and the string players some room to stretch out.
Yeah, no, it's so gorgeous. I mean, it really, I like the way you described that. There was another part at about 307. There's a switch there that was interesting. And I was wondering, is that the relative minor of the key that this is in?
Ooh, let me pull that up.
It was sort of an unexpected shift in the song. But I wrote, I really like it because it gives the piece more dimension and something to resolve back to. Because I was thinking as I was listening to that, you didn't have to do that. Like in your writing, you could have, or one didn't have to do that. They could have kept it just very simple and it wouldn't have had the dimension that you gave it.
So at around the 3-minute mark, I start to cycle through other keys, but I only stay on them for a couple of measures each. And there's this expanse that's happening. The what starts as just the tenors and basses becomes the tenors, or the basses, the tenors and the altos, and then the basses, tenors, altos, and sopranos. So it keeps growing and growing and growing, and the sound just keeps evolving up. So it's not the relative minor. It's just sort of pivoting. So here's a good way to think about it. If you're in the key of C, again, if we're just on our white canvas, we have C, E, and G making up a C major chord. If you pivot using the G, you could play a G major chord, you could play an E flat major chord, and then that G becomes the third instead of the fifth. So I do a lot of experimenting when I've gone through a verse or maybe two verses, and I've really established, okay, we're in the key of E. Then it's time to do something different. And doing something different to me is not just like changing keys without rhyme or reason. It's taking a note and saying, all right, this is no longer the fifth, it's now the root. Oh, this is no longer the root, it's now the third. And I start to cycle through different keys in that spot. That's what you're talking about.
What comes to mind as you're saying that is jazz. And so what am, I guess I've always wondered that too. Is that what jazz musicians are doing? Are they taking, different parts of a certain chord and then they're expanding on it in different ways from there? And because sometimes when you listen to jazz, it goes some places and you're just like, how is that going to ever get back to anywhere?
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, because I mean, I'm certainly not a jazz musician. There's some rhyme or reason and logic to what is being done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think jazz musicians in their quest to take a melody and kind of turn it on its head and improvise are pretty adept at saying, all right, we're going to pivot from this being the third of the chord to this being the fifth of the next key, or whatever. I i suppose there's a part of it that's a little bit self-indulgent. It's like, what would I like to hear next? So it's not math at that point or science at that point. It's like, what makes me feel good moving forward? And maybe I intend to get back to the original key. Maybe I use that moment to cycle through a few keys, and now all of a sudden we've gone from E major to G major. I don't know, just as a total haphazard example. But in creating that moment that you're referencing at the 3 minute mark, I think I knew I wanted to do something different. I knew that I wanted to keep my eye on to me, the apex of the poem, and therefore the apex of my piece needed to be the tree of life. And what I wanted is for the singers and the instrumentalists to sort of create roots that went down and a canopy that went up. And if it sounds like that to you, then I've done my job. And if you think I'm crazy, that's also completely fine.
No, I love that you're saying, because you are writing the music. Conform is like not the right word that I'm looking for, but you wanted an association musically to the lyrics, the poem that we're going to have it be with. I mean, how does it always happen like that? Or do you have music first and then you're finding the particular poem or lyrics that go with it? Or do you ever write lyrics yourself?
I don't write texts. I could. I love writing poetry just sort of on my own, but not for any general purpose other than it feels like a creative outlet, a calm creative outlet. But to answer your first question, sometimes I would say generally, it's the text that is creating um, guidelines for me. The text is creating melodies, it's creating chords, it's giving me direction. And that was definitely the case with I Carry Your Heart. But I did a project a few years ago with Boches 8. And as I was looking at this poem, I was kind of struggling with how to make it sound like those words needed to sound. And I reached back in my little database that just lives in my head and remembered that I had created this melody in college and I didn't know what to do with it. But I hung on to it, and I'm glad I did. I didn't just say, you know what, it's just never going to happen. I filed it away and it became useful like 25 years later. And I gave it to the cellos, the tenors, and the basses, and it fit perfectly. So sometimes there are these moments where I've created something, I've not assigned it to anything. It's just a random series of notes, and I'll look at a text and think, oh, it's presented itself this opportunity, and I go for it. But I would say it's more like, 4/5 text driven, 1/5 random wild hair idea, and sort of reverse engineering